$84 trillion is set to change hands over the next 20 years. Whether you're passing it down or inheriting it, the decisions you make today will shape your family's financial future for generations. Welcome to the Great Wealth Transfer, where David Paulsini, CFP, guides you through the strategies, insights, and pitfalls of navigating one of the largest financial shifts in history. What you don't know could redefine your legacy.
Money is not math, it's behavior. And most of our financial decisions are made emotionally and then justified logically. That's a Carl Richards quote. I think you know Carl Richards, right? So today, for the listeners, this is our first guest on this series. Actually, you're our first guest on the Great Wealth Transfer, and it's intentional because today we're going to be digging into something that underpins everything. Every investment strategy, every retirement plan, every dollar that changes hands or is passed down, and that is, as you know, human behavior, right? So we are joined by you. I'll let you introduce yourself, but and then tell us what you do and how you do it. And then I have some specific questions. We're at the end of this series, and I don't think we're actually going to end the Great Wealth Transfer. It's just we're doing about 12 episodes, and then we're going to write a book using those 12 episodes. So I want to use your behavioral expertise to sprinkle in some of those episodes. So I'll go back a few episodes, ask a high-level question from each one, let you answer it, and then with your permission, I'll have you in our first book. But anyway, why don't you tell the listeners who you are and what you do for folks, and then I'm going to sit in my therapy chair and listen.
Well, I wasn't feeling nervous until you said that you were going to use some of this to put into a book. So no pressure, right?
There's no
I need
pressure.
to say
It'll be edited.
Okay, I need to say some smart things then. If you actually want to edit my name behind that quote and say that it was me, not Carl Richards, that would be fantastic. Slightly unethical, but fantastic. I am Ashley Quamme. I am a financial behavior specialist, financial behavior officer for advisory firms. That is probably a very confusing terminology for most people, which would make sense. How I got here, though, because this title did not exist when I started my career 15 years ago. My background is in mental health. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Prior to the last 2 to 3 years, I had my own private practice down here in Augusta, Georgia. So if there's any golf fans, you know a little bit about where I live down here, but I've had my own practice, had my own clinical practice where I specialized in working with couples, working with families. Money shows up in those conversations. As a therapist, I had no idea how to navigate those conversations or how to help clients, and went on a little bit of an educational journey to figure out how to help clients that struggle relationally with money, conversationally, behaviorally, all of the E's, I say, with money. And really that work led me then to connecting more with financial advisors, and had this crazy idea on a plane a few years ago of what if a therapist worked inside a financial planning firm? What would that look like? So followed that breadcrumb trail, and here I am. Yeah.
How many of you are there?
There are quite a few certified financial behavior specialists doing the role and the work that I do. I know of maybe one other person too. I'm sure there are some. I do not know everybody in the world, but I know
we have one of two.
One other person
We've got one of
that
two.
I know of. Yeah, but definitely you should type that into Google and try to find if there's others.
There you go. All right, so. Well, actually, we started this before we were recording talking about you are really busy right now, and this is not on our agenda at all, but you're busy because of uncertain times and how people are handling that. So if I'm an investor and I'm watching this or I'm listening to this right now, and they are feeling anxious or nervous about the markets or what's going on or all the things that are happening, what would you say to those folks right now?
Here are some of the things that I have been suggesting, keeping in mind that these are more generalizations here. And so take this into context. Some of the things that I will suggest to clients are being mindful and aware of how much scrolling you're doing, how much media consumption are you absorbing and taking in. Sometimes we don't realize the impact to our, consumption around media. What does that do for us when every night we sit down and we watch CNN, Fox News, like what have you, and we watch it for maybe only an hour, 2 hours? What's the impact to that on our mental, emotional well-being? You may not realize that, but if it's causing more anxiety and it's causing a lot more worry, if we're hyper focused on, our accounts, we're checking those balances a lot more now, then maybe consider how much am I consuming from a media standpoint, whether that's through TV, reading headlines, what have you. So do kind of a little audit on that, maybe a little experiment, cut back a little bit, see if you can cut back. And what kind of impact does that have in terms of how you're feeling would be one suggestion there. For those that are working with a financial advisor, or maybe not, too, the other suggestion is take those worries that you're having. What are the thoughts? What are the worries that you're having? And instead of just ruminating around the worry and like the what ifs, let's turn those worries into questions, right? So one of the worries that is pretty common right now is, around maybe your investments or your portfolio, right? Is it going to tank? Am I going to is it going to just go down? Am I going to lose everything? Should I move to Canada? Right. Let's take those worries and let's actually frame it into a question that's applicable, to your situation. So what that might sound like is, if the markets start to or continue to take a downward turn for the next 2 to 3 months, what does that look like for my particular situation? And are there things that I need to do or can we do to maybe buffer that or mitigate some of that? Turn it into a specific question that applies to you. Take that to your financial advisor. Take that to you, Dave. Sorry, you're probably going to get a lot more phone calls now after this, and use that as an opportunity to learn about what's going on economically and how it actually applies to you instead of staying in that like what if place.
I love it. I had a meeting yesterday, and you'll appreciate this. The guy came in, and I'm going to make sure he sees this too. He came in and he had a headline. It literally said "murder in the markets," like everything's red, negative, negative, negative. He does not look at his accounts, so he had no idea what was going on. It was like an emergency. Hey, I need to stop by and talk to you guys, and he's up 2%, right? So he thought he was losing way more than he was losing because he's watching this stuff and listening to it. And he didn't even know he's actually made money this year. So I always tell people, listen, you focus on your plan. What can we control and what matters for you? I like the way that you say it, though, because it's like the cool aunts or uncles stepping in when the parent says it. The kids don't want to listen, but when you say it, we'll listen. For sure. Another interesting quote that I heard about this particular thing, and then we'll move on, is they seem to all start for a different reason, because we hear this time's different, right? This time's different. And especially when it's politically driven, or we haven't had a tariff war before, right? Or trade wars, or 9/11 hadn't happened before, or a pandemic. They're all very, very different, but they've all ended the same, right? So we don't know that that's going to happen, but in every other situation, they've started for some reason, and they've all ended the same. And you said it, Ashley, 2 to 3 months. Like, does 2 to 3 months really affect your financial plan? So I want to take that one step further, and I'll ask you this, and then we'll move on from this question. What if people are worried that literally not 2 to 3 months, and I'll just quote some clients, this president is going to end the world and life as we know it? What do you say to those folks?
Look, I'm a therapist at heart, so keep in mind that like my therapist responses are probably
gonna ask
a
me
little
questions?
bit different.
Are you gonna ask me
No,
questions,
I'm not going to ask you. No, not right now. Maybe if you come on my podcast, I'll ask you questions. No, listen. So the first thing that I do is I validate, right, whatever the thought and feeling is. Keeping in mind that validation, just because you validate the way someone feels, doesn't mean that you agree with what they are saying. So in that particular scenario, if you're the client, Dave, I would say like, hey, I totally get where you might feel that way. It would make sense why that might worry you. And that is very concerning. I may not necessarily agree with your rationale. I may not agree like with what you said, but I can at least validate your experience. Oftentimes what clients really want is to be validated. They want to be heard and seen. And when they're in an emotional state like, the president is going to end the world, right? That's a pretty extreme thought. So let's imagine the emotion that's behind that. We have to first attune to that emotion, that panic, that worry, and settle it down verbally, right? First, before we can come in with any kind of logic. By the way, parentheses, this trick works for your kids. It works with your partner. It works for everything. So you're welcome. Bonus
Love
tips,
Yep.
bonus content right here.
Totally
but
understand.
anytime, right, a client is talking about, I worry about this or I think this, and there's some pretty big high degree of emotions like behind it. First, I'm going to respond by validating that, right? Because I want to get their brain a little bit more, right, settled so that then I can explore some of the thought and behind it. So, that's what do I say? Like I validate that first. Now, beyond that, some of what I might do in a situation like that is understand where are they getting this information from? Right? Who is telling them this? So again, going back to that understanding of our media consumption, like I want to know like, hey, like I get where you might hear this. I'm just curious about like, what are you watching and like, what are you reading that's informing that thought or that worry? Tell me a little bit more about that. Now, what some clients will say is that they read headlines. Very, very common. What I might do in that situation is educate a little, right, to a degree on, hey, let's remember that headlines are designed to get clicks, right? What people say on the news, those like big dramatic headlines like murder in the market, right? Yeah. That is designed to get you to click, to listen, to consume that media, right? It is a ploy, right? It's a psychological trick, right? To get your attention. It does not mean that there's accuracy behind it. So understanding where are you getting that information? If it's from a family member, tell me a little bit more about that relationship with the family member. Oh, it's your uncle, right? And you think, a lot about him, you respect him, you regard him, and he's saying that the world is going to end with this current president and you trust him. Okay, tell me a little bit about his education, his professional experience. Where is that opinion coming from? Like I want to understand a little bit more about who is influencing this client's thoughts and their feelings and their behaviors, right? The saying, the expression that I use is understanding why they think, feel, and do the way they do, right? So tell me a little bit more about this thought and the feelings that are coming from it. Who's influencing, what is influencing it, and then how can we maybe start to craft a plan in terms of understanding, okay, well then what do you want to do with all of that? How should we respond?
Interesting. So, okay, I'm going to totally change gears here. I could talk to you about that the whole time, but we have limited time today. So, can I give you two like real life scenarios? And then
go for it.
These are not on anything I sent you in advance. So,
awesome. Cool.
Yeah, you're going to love it. You got this. So let's say we have three brothers that are taking care of a father's estate while he's still around. Two of the brothers contribute a lot of money and one brother just cannot. The other two brothers think that they should get more from this father when he passes away, or the third brother that's not paying as much should not get as much, or that he needs to pay them back in some way. The father might not think that. How do we handle all of that as a financial advisor or just somebody giving advice on father doesn't want it, two brothers think it's fair, it might from the outside look like it's fair, doesn't feel like it's a brother number three who might not be able to afford to help out, but he wants to. How do we handle that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. You need a better guest on your podcast to answer that question. No. So here's what I would say is that there are a lot of layers, right, to that. You said dad is the client here. Who is the actual
Yeah, we'll say he's
client
a client.
in the scenario? Okay. Yeah. Dad's the client. Yeah. So like if, as an advisor, as a team, conversation first really kind of is with the client, understanding a little bit more context. What are all the layers involved here? Look, here's the thing. When it comes to families, there's no perfect solution. You're never going to make everyone 100% happy. However, I'm saying that as an outsider. That's really easy for me to say, right?
Yep.
Being in that position, there would be a lot, of emotion, right, around that. So some of the work, at least that I do, where I come into play, is actually helping advisors navigate family dynamic scenarios, maybe similar to this one. And so understanding fully, what is the client, in this case, the dad, what does the dad really want? What's important to him? And what are the considerations? What are the consequences to maybe each of the options and the scenarios there? If willing, I would be interested in having conversations with each of the sons and exploring just a little bit more what's going on kind of from them, from a psychological standpoint, right? This kind of theme of fairness is very common amongst siblings, right? Fairness and like justice, right? Or that things have to be equal, right? And equal and equitable are not always the same thing. This is a perfect scenario or a perfect example, really, kind of that. I don't know what brother number 3 is contributing to the reason why he can't or is not on the same level as the other 2 brothers, right? But understanding a bit more about what's there, why.
Well, let's just say I'm making this up, they each make $1 million a year, and brother number 3 makes $50,000 a year. They can just financially do more.
You're right. Yeah.
But that's not brother number 3's fault.
Yeah. So there's likely some sibling dynamics there, maybe some feelings of resentment, possibly on both sides. And yeah, it wouldn't be fair. There's not in terms of like, how do I work with this or what do we do? Like, there's not a perfect setup or scenario or plan here. It's got to be what works ultimately for the dad in this case. What kind of plan can he put in place that at the end of the day, when he lays his head down at night to go to sleep, that he can feel okay enough? So I use that expression very intentionally. Can we be okay enough, right? Are you going to feel great? No, probably not. Are you going to feel terrible? Like, hopefully no, right? We don't want to put plans in place that make you feel terrible. Likelihood of putting a plan in place where you're going to feel super awesome and it's great, probably unlikely, but can we just strive for okay enough when it comes to a plan like this, knowing at the end of the day, that you are taking care of your kids in the way that matters to you, that is important to you from a legacy standpoint, from a meaning and purpose standpoint, knowing it may not land on your sons in the way that you're hoping.
Yeah, that's what seems to happen, right? And I know that's a tough question. So I want to go back to like episode number, I think it was number 2 or 3 that we did on this great wealth transfer. And one of the things that keeps coming up is folks making mistakes when they inherit money. So we see all these cliche mistakes, and you know what all of them are. They spend it all, or they treat it like a lottery, or whatever. How, from the behavioral standpoint, do we set it up? And I'm not talking about the laws. We can set up a trust and we can do other things that make sure that doesn't happen. But psychologically, how do we help those folks avoid that ahead of time? And then once they do receive money or assets, how can we help these folks not blow through it all?
Great question. You're not going to be able to save them all. But some of the conversations that I have with, let's just say the, kind of Gen 1 parents here, right? So the parents that are leaving the money, is it's important to have conversations along the way with your adult kids. These aren't just one-time conversations, right? Oftentimes, parents say, well, I had that conversation. I told them that they were, likely I was going to leave everything and they probably would get $1 million, maybe a couple, like when I die. And I told them that like 10 years ago, right? Well, that was 10 years ago. Like we need to be having conversations along the way. And can we also go through some thought experiments with that adult kid and, hey, what would you use the money for? Some education. This is a great opportunity for financial advisors to get that younger generation in and start to educate them and start to help them out and understand just from a resource standpoint, like what are the options? So oftentimes I find when that kind of generation two, let's just say young kind of adults, here, oftentimes what I find, and this is apart from any maybe like mental health related issues such as like addiction. So I'm not talking about where there's, any type of mental health related or physical health related issues. Oftentimes it's a lack of knowing what to do with it, right? I've received all this money. I don't know what my options are. What do they immediately start thinking about is spending on upgrades and new things. They don't maybe understand like what's possible in terms of maybe investing some of it or maybe paying down debt or going to a financial advisor and saying, hey, can you help me figure out what to do with this? So really educating like from a very kind of early, like on place, like that younger generation who will be inheriting that money, helping them to understand when that time comes, here are options that will be available to you. You can, come and talk to me about this. You'll want to look at, possibly, is there any, debt maybe that needs to be paid down depending upon your financial situation? Are there goals you should be putting money towards? All of those things is a great starting place for being able to hopefully mitigate spending through all of that.
Yeah, we see it all the time. And the entire intention of this series or podcast or this YouTube channel, The Great Wealth Transfer, is to help educate those folks that doesn't happen because it just keeps on happening. And I don't think people actually know where to go. And a lot of times, you're right, it's a surprise. I did not know I was going to get $700,000. So I'm asking you all the tough questions now. I got two kind of tough ones that I wanted to ask you. I have a lot of parents that I work with that even against my advice, I would say, don't want to tell their kids what they're going to get. We'll do you're familiar with an asset map. We'll do like a map of where the assets are. If they show their children, they'll put like $1 as a placeholder rather than 1.2 million because they don't want the kids to know that they have 1.2 million. Then it's a surprise. There's no conversation. And it's almost weird for us as the advisor to reach out to those adult children because they're like, why are you talking to me? My parents don't have any money. What do you tell the parents that are going to be leaving this money behind if they don't want to tell their children?
Yeah. So understanding what is the fear, what's the concern behind telling them, right? And usually what I hear, and I don't know about you, but usually I hear of, well, we don't want them to assume that they're going to get this. We don't want to spoil them. We don't want them to maybe do their own savings or be financially responsible. We don't want them to rely on us, right? There's some kind of fear around it, being disclosed there. It's pretty common, at least like what I hear. What I oftentimes shed some light on is by not talking about it, by not being transparent, maybe along the way. It doesn't have to be all at once, but it can be along the way. By not being transparent, you actually set them up and run the risk for everything that we just talked about, not knowing how to manage the money, it being a surprise, possibly maybe like using the money that's not aligned with what they need or their values, using it in a smart way. It's also a missed opportunity just for connection and like intimacy from a family standpoint as well. And I get money is a very difficult thing to talk about, and showing numbers is very vulnerable. I completely understand that. I would never dismiss it. But what is the risk? And this is kind of a rhetorical question, right? Like what's the risk if we don't share those numbers with them? Right. And to me, the risk is far greater than if we choose to step into that fear and share the numbers with them, while simultaneously, telling them, hey, this is what we would like for you to use that money for, or, hey, it's not a guarantee. This is just kind of what we're thinking. And we want to be able to help set you up for success for how to use this money in a way, that really helps you thrive financially, along the way, but also after we're gone.
Yeah. So that splits off into two things in my head. And one is the feeling of entitlement for some folks. And then the other side is the feeling of guilt for inheriting that money. And those are the last two questions I'll ask you, and then we'll let you go. But the feeling of entitlement. So I know my parents, this is not me speaking, but I know my parents have $16 million, and when they pass away, I'm one of two that's going to get it, and I deserve that, even though I might not be responsible. If the parents aren't setting those folks up properly or educating them, how do we help avoid those feelings of entitlement? It could be a business, right? Maybe I inherit my parents' business. Maybe it could be a large asset. The adult children, I do run into this. They feel like they're entitled to it, and it's just a way that they've lived forever. And I fear that they're going to run out because they didn't do it themselves. So how do we help those people avoid those bad decisions or that feeling of entitlement in general?
Yeah, entitlement is a tricky thing when it comes to inheritance and family dynamics. So one, let's just validate that it is perfectly natural to feel entitled to parents' money left over. And what I mean by that is, of course you would. You are their child, right? Or you are, like you are related to them. Of course you would feel like, from a judgment place, the money should come down to you. Like there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It might be offensive, right? And speak to maybe the relationship or knowing like what your parents think and feel about you, right? If the money didn't come to you, right? If they like gave it all away, like that might be offensive and really hurtful. So I think we use this expression like entitlement and like, which makes sense, but clients will say like, I deserve that. Like I should have that. And let's not negatively judge that, right? Let's understand that one, it's normal and it's natural to feel that way when it comes to your parents. It's a relationship, right? And what does it mean then to not have that, right? It might be really hurtful. It might speak to how they feel about you. Now, when it's entitlement around like, I deserve it, not just because I'm the son, but because I do, and I'm going to just go off and like do whatever I like want with it. Like that's a little bit different. I think that there's a lot of ways. This goes back to family communication. Parents are afraid to talk to their adult kids about money, how to manage it, the meaning behind it, the purpose behind it, right? All of that stuff from the numbers, but also the emotional, psychological side of it. And there's a lot of opportunity in talking to your kids around not expectations, because sometimes parents take this approach of like, I expect you to like manage it like well and like be good stewards and pay it for it. Like
60-year-old son, yeah.
Right. Yeah. They use this as like an expectation that comes across almost as like a shaming, like judgment type of way. But let's talk about like expectations for like hopes and dreams. And like, we want you to be successful and we want to help set you up for success because that's what matters to us. And in doing that, like we want to share our numbers with you. And we want to start to put things in place now that will be able to help you to manage that or to feel comfortable and confident in being able to manage that when the time does come. So, entitlement's tricky. Feelings of guilt are really tricky. All of that is tricky. I find that if, as the parents, if we let those emotions, those fears, those what ifs, if we allow those to dominate our behaviors, we miss a lot of opportunity and actually inadvertently set things up in such a way to where those fears maybe they may play out, unfortunately.
Okay, so last question.
You said that last time.
I know. I said two more, but you got me. See, you're paying attention. Well, everything, I could keep this going forever. What if you don't want an inheritance, but your parents want to give it to you? Like, and I'll give you one example, and maybe this is live therapy, and maybe I am talking about myself. We have a garage full of stuff that I'm going to have someday. I don't want it, but you want to be gracious. And you don't want to say, I don't want that. Like, what if I'm a minimalist? What if I don't want the money because of not feelings of guilt, but because of future feelings of judgment? I don't want to go buy a new truck because my parents know that I'm going to inherit $1 million from them, and they think they're prepaying me for that or something. It's like, I'd rather just not have it at all than have to deal with any of those feelings. So what do you say to the people inheriting the money that literally don't? By the way, if that is me, am I the weird one? It's literally the opposite of the entitlement. Like, I don't want anything.
Yeah, I would want to know more, like, where does that come from? So what is also the fear around you getting everything? And you just kind of spoke to, right, a few of them, that others will judge me. Like, understanding that's at least how I would work with, this particular person. Like, what is the fear? Where does it come from? Because depending upon where it comes from, we might be able to find some solutions. If it comes from a place of, because I'm not confident that I'll know what to do with it. I'm scared to have that much because I don't trust myself, or I won't know how to do it. Okay, that's one of those, like, I don't want to say easily like solvable things, but it's like, that's figure outable. I say that a lot. I don't know if it's an actual word, but I say figure outable.
It is now.
Great. Like, that's one of those things where it's like, okay, that's figure outable, right? You don't know what to do with it. You're scared. So that's why you're resistant and you don't want it. Cool. We can put some things in place to help mitigate that fear. If it's, I don't want it because I'm a minimalist, awesome. Great. Nothing wrong with that. Can you receive that money though, and still be a minimalist? Does having that money change who you are from an identity place of being a minimalist? Well, it doesn't have to, unless you allow it to, right? And so maybe what that looks like is setting up charitable contributions, right? Giving away money, being generous, right? With that, you can still maintain that minimalist identity and use that money for greater good, right? Again, that's figure outable. If it's, I'm scared of judgment, well, what kind of measures or barriers can we put in place to where, again, maybe you still maintain that lifestyle? And judgment, I would want to know more about. Is it you judging yourself, or is it fear of others judging others?
The people
judging
leaving
you?
the money judging. It's almost like prejudging in advance. My prejudging to the prepayment of the inheritance.
Oh my gosh, that's like, I can't say bad words, but like, oh my gosh, like that's like, yeah, that's like a mind twist right there. Like, yeah, there would be a lot more questions like around understanding just where is that coming? Where is that coming from? Where does it come from? Who told you that? How did you get that message that would happen? And what's the accuracy or likelihood of it? Right? Sometimes just because we think it doesn't mean that that's actually what would happen. And what are other possibilities? Maybe that wouldn't happen. So what else could happen? Like from a prejudgment place, like we're so focused on like, if I inherit this money, I'm worried about being prejudged, right? For it. Well, what are other possibilities? Maybe you won't be prejudged. Could it be like excited? Could it be hopeful? Are those options there? Like,
Actually,
I don't know.
Am I still self-made if I inherit $5 million?
I don't know, Dave. Are you still self-made, right? Think about that timeline prior to receiving it, right? And I mean, I don't know what your answer would be. I know what my answer would be for you, right? But my answer would be yes. Like, there's nothing that changes your identity, right, from it. It would be maybe no different. This might sound messed up. I'm not thinking this entirely through, so forgive me, or just edit this out. But it would be like maybe thinking about it, like reframing the thought of the inheritance. Maybe it's not inheritance as in giving money. Maybe it's, I don't know, like similar to the stock market, like going up and, making a lot of money, right? When you only invested, right? Maybe like, a small number. You're the math guy. I'm not great with like all the number stuff and like financial jargon here, right? But how can we reframe that thought there? And is it like other situations? Maybe it's like the sell of a business, right? Like you started this business and then you sold it, let's just say for 5 million, like, that's a lot of money. Like, are you still made in that way? I don't know, but there's a lot of other ways I think we could explore that and possibly reframe it to hopefully maybe something that resonates and ultimately gives you some peace at the end of the day.
It's really interesting. So we did some posts on Facebook and LinkedIn about this, and these folks know who they are. They're like, hey, Dave, if people don't want their inheritance, give them my account number. And stuff like, and I hear that, and I'm telling you, for me personally, this is me. I'm thinking, you want a handout from someone you don't know? Wouldn't that make you feel bad? And I guess I'm the weird one, because a lot of people think that it might be an ego thing, right? I don't know what, but I would never want some random person to hand me $2 million. And I guess I'm in the minority by far.
No, I think it speaks to what you value, but I also think it speaks to identity. And those are two really, really big aspects that oftentimes don't get explored, like in financial planning. What clients value, what do you value? And also, how is that tied to your identity, who you think you are, who you are like as a person, right? Being a self-made person, that ego, if you want to call it that, like that's identity work there. And so understanding who does this person, how do they view themselves, right? What is that model of self that they think about themselves for? How is that attached to their values? Oftentimes that's going to leave and drive behavior, right? Whether it's wanting or refusing, like inheritance, handouts, mismanagement of money, all of that stuff.
Yep. Yeah. I'm like, skip it to my kids, guys. Anyway, Ashley, this was awesome. We're already like 40 minutes into this. It's crazy. So we could keep going. If the listeners want to keep the conversation going with you, how can they find you and get a hold of you and keep it going?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I hang out primarily there. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Ashley Quamme. You can check out my website, www.beyondthefp.com, my own practice, Beyond the Plan. And I also have a podcast similar. Well, not similar. I mean, it's a little different, but I also have a podcast like you, Planning and Beyond. You can check that out as well, or send me a good old fashioned email. All of those can be linked there. Yeah.
We'll have all the links and all that fun stuff, Ashley. We're going to have a lot of material from this going out over the next few weeks. So listen, we appreciate your time. And for the listeners out there, I always am with the same thing, Ashley. Do you know what it is?
No.
Make it a great day. Dave. Just say make it a great day.
Make it a great day.
You did it.
Thank you for listening to the Great Wealth Transfer Podcast. If this podcast resonates with you, reach out to 6 Point Financial Partners at 585-485-6048 or email dpaulsini@6pointfp.com.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. Information here is provided in part by third-party sources. These sources are generally deemed to be reliable. However, neither 6 Point Financial Partners, Private Client Services, nor RFG Advisory guarantee the accuracy of third-party sources. The views expressed here are those of 6 Point Financial Partners. They do not necessarily represent those of Private Client Services, RFG Advisory, their employees, or their clients. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by 6 Point Financial Partners or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives through Private Client Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory LLC, RFG Advisory, or RFG. A registered investment advisor. Private Client Services, 6 Point Financial Partners, and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.